our calling is not to see how fast we can grow an organization. Our calling is to faithfulness.
Well done, that good and faithful servant. Not well done, thou efficient servant. Not well done, effective servant. Faithful.
If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Social media is causing you to feel envious. Just quit being on it. You really don't have to be on it.
If you're jealous of some pastors in your area, one of the things that I would encourage is, have you met with them and befriended them? It's really hard to hate somebody that you love. Welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank, and I am glad that you are here. The whole crew is here today on this Monday, the week of Christmas, right? I think this is the week of Christmas. So we are glad that you are here joining us. Hopefully, maybe you have the week off already. Maybe you have at least starting tomorrow off. Whatever you have off, we're glad that you're spending some time with us this week. My name is Frank. I'm down in Central Florida. Up in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Jeffrey Simpson.
What's up, everybody?
Shooting down drones in South Carolina, we got Delmar Pete.
Greetings and salutations.
Dude, we getting the drones up here.
Here in Safety Harbor, Florida, we got Andrew Larson.
The truth is out there.
Spending the big bucks on parking lots, we got Timothy Miller.
Hey.
Tim, do you want to share with us what your church is doing, where you guys are spending the big bucks on things that don't help your ministry?
It's a weird thing.
New church
It's your church now too, Frank.
It's our church, but when it comes to being good stewards of what you've been entrusted to, sometimes that means taking care of the building, taking care of the property. Really the goal is to set up the next set of leaders for success, right? Like, we don't want them to inherit some of the same issues that we've inherited.
Is that what
the last few years.
disc golf course is doing?
The disc golf course is absolutely, that's for the community, baby. You know what that's all about.
Hey, tell the numbers.
Facts.
Hey, we had 4,000 disc golfers, something like that, this year alone.
How many were repeats?
You would have numbers on that.
We had exact numbers and stats at the annual meeting last night.
Nice.
It's hilarious.
How are you tracking that? You got cameras? Like, what's going on?
It's a check-in. So we have we use Planning Center check-in. So they scan to check in before they play each round. Nice. I think we have 500 or 600 guys that are just playing over and over, but it's still pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But the next giant project that was brought up was, hey, we got to fix the parking situation. The asphalt is struggling. The drainage is bad, and this is not a cheap project. So I'm reading the email now that's requesting the vote from the elders to get this thing approved. I mean, this is $100,000 project. Like, and that's just, in my mind, like, it's hard to swallow that. Like, I think stomaching that is very difficult. So I'm asking some questions back right now because I want to know, how many quotes did we get? Is this the absolute best deal we could possibly get? This is just, it's a lot. It's a lot. So and these aren't like, I mean, it'll look cool. But like, when I think of like a use of money like that, I'm like, man, is that really that much fun? Like, sometimes when it comes to ministry and having to spend money, it's not always fun. AC units, new roofs, new parking lots. We needed quite a few handicap stalls done as well. So all these things just cost money, which is the worst.
This is what I mean. We just had our annual meeting yesterday, and I will say we can make fun of the disc golf stuff, but literally hundreds and hundreds of people are on the campus every single week, and it's a gift to the community that obviously the community is using, not just Lakeview people, because the Lakeview golfers is actually a very small percentage of the people who are using it. And so if you can get people who don't go to your church to come on your property on a consistent basis like this, that's a good deal.
Almost like if they were dropping their kids off at a preschool every morning.
But do you like make them come to a Bible study or something? Because I mean, otherwise, what's the point?
All right. Well, let's dive into a question. Oh, wait, what are we doing? I got stuff to talk to you about. Well, first off, Practically Pastoring Conference is happening February 17th to the 19th here in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and you're going to want to be there. We got the most affordable conference that you'll ever go to in 2025. This is the greatest Christmas gift your church can give you this year. And if you're like, my church wants to be good stewards, we have to buy a parking lot, so we don't have that much money, I can get you a great discount code. So reach out to any of the 5 of us if you're looking for a discount code, because we got discount codes to give to you. And we want you at the conference. We got some exciting things planned. We got good food coming on that Tuesday. We have a pastor's wives event where there's some already really exciting stuff being planned right there. It's going to be a really, really good time. We want to see you there. Go to practicallypastoringconference.com. And lastly, we want to thank our amazing sponsor, Church Merch, for making all this possible, not just the conference, but they've been a supporter of this podcast, and we look forward for them to being a supporter of ours. If you need church merch, shirts, we saw on there, me and Andrew saw that they have a 64-ounce stainless steel mug. That thing will keep you hydrated. When Jeff goes into the gym and he lifts and he gets very dehydrated because he has all these muscles, he's able to drink 64 ounces of water, and he'll be able to go back to the gym the next day and get back in there. So if you need merch for your church and put your church logo on that 64-ounce stainless steel bottle, go to promotionsguy.com/church merch. And
you give those to your security team, and if people attack the pastor, you can just chuck those bottles at them. Dude, take out an intruder easy.
Yeah, that will not get passed on TSA. That is a weapon, all right? That is the real deal. All right, church merch. Thank you. All right, let's go to the first question. This is a question from a Facebook group that I found, and it's a very simple question. Jeff, I want you to answer this question because I think you have the strongest opinion on this. When do you stop checking in on members who have stopped coming for 4 months?
About 3 months before you ask this question. I know that sounds harsh, but the reality is there's a lot of nuance to it. Are they members who have stopped coming? Did they leave the church? Did they move away? If this is a person who has told you, hey, we're leaving the church and we don't want to be at this church and we're gone, honestly, I don't know that there is any checking in. I mean, I think they've removed themselves from that part of the community. If this is a person who stopped coming because some life situation happened that you know about, then for sure keep checking in. The assumption is they're still part of the church. They're just not coming for a reason you know about. If they just no-showed and ghosted you and it's been 4 months and you've been checking in, I think you're free to stop checking in after, I'd say, about a month or so. I mean, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months max. But I don't think 4 months of you checking in and them just ghosting you, you need to kind of release that. But like I said, there could be situations where somebody's gone for 4 months and you know why, and then you keep checking in on them. Or we have the situation here where people retire and move away. And then I don't think you need to check in on them in terms of like a member, but maybe a little less frequently. And when you think about them, or sometimes I just kind of scroll through my phone contacts and just see what names pop up that, oh yeah, I haven't talked to that person in a long time. Just shoot them a text. It's pretty easy to take 15, 20 minutes and just kind of scroll through your phone contact list and just do that with people who have maybe been gone for a while, but because they moved away or some non-negative reason. So that's kind of my opinion on it. If they come to you like, we're leaving the church and we're gone, then I don't think there's you don't have to check in on them at all.
I do think that last meeting, I think you should have something you are ready to say in the sense of like, hey, so we've noticed you haven't been here a while, and that last check-in you need to do, I would have a very frank, are you going to still be a member here meeting? Especially if they're in a covenant relationship with your church, I think you owe that to them as their pastor. Just like if your spouse left you for 4 months and abandoned you, I think you should be like, hey, if you're not coming back, I need to figure out what this is like. So that last conversation, I wouldn't say cut up the heat, but I would definitely let it just step into that little space of courage and say, hey, so you haven't been here in 4 months. I just want to know, is this church, are you going to come back? Is this church not here? And then if they, because they need to feel that they're missing actually means something other than just checking in on you. Well, this actually is with your membership. And that also goes into the broader conversation of what does it mean to be an active member of the church? How does your church count membership? Which I think is a great space to be having that conversation. Okay, if someone just dips out for 4 months and been going somewhere else, like you don't do that, so if you're in a covenant relationship with the church, you can't do that. Like there's given your obligation and where your heart should be. So it's either a life issue or it's a discipleship issue. But either way, I'd have that conversation at the end on that last call and say, hey, so been checking in on you, but I just want to know is are you still going to be coming around? And then you can explain to them what being an active member is like. And I know some churches even go as far as say, well, we're not going to come back. Say, okay, well, you're going to get a letter in the mail from us. And if you wouldn't mind, can you just, that letter is going to say in here why you're leaving, just so that way in their mind, it formalizes the process. So either bring them back or they'll really be out. And sometimes people need to see the formality of it and the finality of it in order to realize this is a big deal. So that's what I would do, just to engage the conversation with them that last time.
I tend to read my own situations into questions like this because I'm a very self-centered person, and I realize that about myself.
We all know that.
But thank you. So we had a situation fairly recently where someone hadn't been around a while, and it was a lady in her 80s who had been very involved, sat on committees, did all the things, and then just kind of disappeared.
You didn't know she died?
What? She didn't die.
What?
Jim.
Sorry.
But she had moved into an assisted living facility at her kids' insistence and was just kind of mad at the world because of it. And it was like, I can't take it out on my kids, and so I'm going to take it out on the church. And one of the most recent times I talked to her, it was well, no one from the church even comes to check on me. I'm like, well, that's not true, because I know that you've talked to these two elders and these two people that used to be in your small group. And, so I listed like 5 or 6 people. She's like, yeah, but nobody else. Like, well, that's literally 15% of the church that you've talked to in the past week. And it's kind of the tricky situation, because now am I going and checking in on this person and calling her based on, I feel guilty, or I know she's going to be mad if she doesn't have a weekly check-in time with me, but who else do I do that for? And so that's one of those tricky things too. But I think when you know why someone hasn't been coming for a while, that's when you make a decision. But you also don't check in or don't do check in. Yeah. You kind of know what I'm saying. I'm mumbling. But don't let your guilt and your motivations be the reason that you're not removing someone from a role, or don't let your anger over something, don't let that be the reason that you take someone off the role. Sometimes there's real life scenarios where someone hasn't been around in a while, and the most loving, Christ-like thing the church can do is to say, I get it. I understand. How can we pray for you? Hey, I'm going to show up at your house. And there are some times that someone hasn't been around for a while, and the most loving, Christ-like thing that the church can do is rebuke that person and say, well, fine, you've broken your covenant and we're done here.
I guess my follow-up question would be have you been ghosted for 4 months? Like, has there just been no communication at all? That just seems bizarre to me. When we don't have a member if we have a member that's not showing up to church for, a couple of weeks or a month or so, typically either a small group leader is doing a check-in, one of our elders is doing a check-in. And I think most of the time we're getting a response. Like, we've been out of town, we've been traveling, we haven't been feeling well.
A hurricane flooded out our entire house.
We've had hurricane issues. I mean, I don't know how much of my time I'm taking if months are going by, and I've done several follow-ups. I'm probably going to just reach out and say, hey, however we can be praying, we're praying for you. But like, if there's just no feedback, no follow-up, that just seems odd to me. I'm not keeping them on the membership rolls when they've gone completely, I don't know.
And if they do ghost you like that, I do think it's even more important to send a formal thing in the mail as well, because if they're not responding to anything, just say, hey, we've noticed you haven't been here. We've tried to reach out to you this way. If it's been an error on our part, we're forever sorry. Humans make mistakes too. Here's my cell phone, but until otherwise noted, you're done.
But we covered this in membership class. And when it comes to covenant membership, one of the expectations is regular attendance to the Sunday morning worship gathering. And if there's an issue with that, then, let's have a conversation. What's going on? Is there a reason you can't be with us on Sundays? Like maybe there is an assisted living situation.
I was at one of the other campuses. Maybe I was watching the live stream, how is that any different than showing up in person at a campus?
And we even say, like, if you need to be on the live stream for whatever reason, let us know. And we'll try our best to continue ministering to you and with you. But I don't know, getting ghosted for 4 months just seems odd. I don't think we should be wasting resources after that amount of time.
I don't think so either.
I think you would definitely want to play in, like, if this was a tenured member who'd been there for like a decade, that's huge. If it's somebody who joined in the last year, it might be just a traditional church hopper. So it's real hard without getting any more context behind the specific question. Because I also think this is probably one of those things you can't just put like a blanket this is how you do it every scenario, because different families have different ways of engaging our church.
So I have a good question. So Jeff, you only have one service, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jeff and Andrew have one service. So this is probably maybe a little easier for you guys. Tim, I overheard you or someone at Lakeview, our church, say, "Oh, ever since we had 3 services, I've been like missing people because they've been going to different services." And I know Andrew just made a joke about different campuses, which that's like a big issue is like you can really go under the radar because you just assume someone's at a different location, but you can also assume someone's at a different campus. I guess what systems do you guys have in place to make sure that there's not a back door that we're missing out on? Because let's say, hypothetically, it's an empty nester that comes on Sunday morning. Those are the people I think they'd be the most likely to go under the radar because there's no typical metrics of them being calculated because you don't have a check-in for kids. If you don't have a Sunday school program, you don't have that. You know what I'm saying? Like how are you, I mean, if you are a pastor of a church that has multiple services and there's people in the service that are coming in and you're trying to make sure you're keeping tabs of everybody, could a person be attending your church for 4 months who hasn't come for 4 months because they have multiple services and you haven't kept track with them? What other ways do you keep track of people to make sure that no one falls through the grates?
We when someone joins Lakeview covenant membership process, as soon as they get voted in on by the congregation, we then add them to the membership roll, which then gets divvied up between the 6 or now 7 elders after last night. So between the 7 elders, we each have a membership list of about 30 to 40 people. And every month, at least, you can do it more than once a month if you want, but at least once a month, it is the job of our elders to contact everyone on their member care list to see how they're doing, how they can be praying for them. And typically from those contacts, that's how we find out, oh, so-and-so's not able to come anymore, they moved away, or here's a major prayer request. So that system seems to work. So as the church grows, that means we're going to need to keep adding elders because 30 to 40 people per elder is kind of max right now. That's hard to keep up with more than that. It's not difficult because Planning Center literally allows you to send one email and it can be a stock email, goes out to 30 people, but when they respond, it only comes back to you, which is nice. So once a month, I have my stock email ready. Hey, it's my monthly check-in with you. Just want to see how I can be praying for you, what's going on, any updates in life. And I'll typically get great responses from that email every single day.
Do you do it by people or households? Where it's like, hey, this household of 6 people joined the church and that's going to Tim. And then
if each individual has an email, all of them will get a separate email.
Okay.
It even inserts their first name in it too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I have several husbands and wives, but they will be separate emails because they could be separate prayer requests. So yeah, good question.
They'd be praying for each other.
Usually that's what it is.
Yeah. That's why they joined the church. And that's another thing that's a real scenario here is we have people who they see they see the church as a last resort and hey, the marriage is falling apart. The kids are a mess. We've done the vacation. We've done the quality time. Nothing's working. Let's go to church. And then it works for 3 or 4 months and then it stops working. And so they stop coming. And so that's a thing that we see time and time again as well. I think one thing that is huge in this whole conversation is membership. If you are a member of a church, well, then you're assigned to an elder. Then there's someone who not only knows your name, but has your contact information and they're reaching out to you. You could show up for 6 months at a time and sit around a table, join a small group. But if you're not a member, it's going to be really hard for us to check in on you. So Dale, the way at the beginning of this, you said something about it depends on your church's view of membership. Right. And I think you're exactly right. There's an element where once you're in until you are formally out. And so we're going to fight for you. But I think 4 months is too long to be fighting.
I've seen people go before, and then you hear the gossip around the community. Well, so-and-so said they had a falling out with you and whatever. Or we've heard they've been over at First such and such a church. You could leverage that as a way to make that conversation, that last one. Hey, babe, listen, I wanted to catch up with you. I don't like to participate in gossip, so I heard this. And it might be a way to enter a healing conversation if the reason they haven't been coming is because of some kind of hurt. Because you could take the high road approach of I'm not going to just listen to what people are saying, or even I'm not going to, or I've noticed this online, I'm not going to speculate. It's a way of respecting them even on the way out. So that way it doesn't necessarily burn the bridge.
I like the idea of like the elders all reaching out to people. That is probably like the most like what's interesting though, Tim, is that you're in a sweet spot right now where you can still do that. Like if metrics go a couple years from now, if it's Lakeview's desire, if they grow and they have a trajectory of growing, and they get to 1,000 people, does that mean you have 30 elders? Like that's a lot of what at some point you have to figure that out.
So we have had those questions, and one thing that we did last night at the members meeting was we voted on our revised bylaws. So this was actually to help address this exact issue. We're now adopting elder emeritus. So basically, we're going to invite previous elders to join the elder emeritus program, where they're not going to have to attend regular monthly elder meetings.
They're not voting on things.
They're not going to be voting on things, but they can be brought in as consultants, as other eyes or ears on a big project. Or what we would love to do is utilize them when it comes to member care.
I think that is
so they will still have
fantastic
members
idea
that they will be caring for, even though they're not actively serving on the board, and they will be able to update us with their member care list. So that's a way we could have 10, 15, 20, 30, right, people still helping out with member care, even though we still have under 10 elders right now.
I think that is. I don't think having 30 elders for a church of 1,000 people is bad. Now, it makes things complicated.
Sure.
The previous church that I served on had 9 committees in the church, and the rule was that they had to have 2 elders on each committee. So we had 18 elders, which was fine when the church was 800 people.
Sure.
But when the church was 250, you had a whole lot of unqualified elders with that. But I don't think having a huge number of elders, not huge, but I don't think having a percentage of elders that reflects a percentage of the population, especially if you have mature Christians who are qualified elders. But I think that way is really a smart way of doing it, because then, hey, my time as an elder is over. Don't care about you anymore. Not checking in. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
But also, is the office of an elder one that is supposed to be for a fixed time? That's another.
Well, that's in our bylaws.
I know. I'm saying, but
right.
Spiritually,
I would say each congregation, they're going to have to tackle that issue,
Yeah.
because biblically, you're not going to get that answer.
Yeah, but I think that is the perfect way to handle it. Well done, Lakeview. Frank, did you know when you asked the question? Is that why you asked the question?
I just think this question, it started off with just a very snarky comment, and it has given us such a rich conversation here that like I'm really proud of this question. The way you guys have talked about this is really, really good. Hey, let's dive into our next question. This next question comes from Reddit. It says this: I've been on social media lately, and I've noticed a feeling of envy rise up in me towards other fellow pastor colleagues, when I see their ministries experiencing much growth. I know this is wrong. It might even be sinful, but I still don't know how to best deal with this feeling. I should be happy for them and pray for even more growth for them and their ministry, but I'm just being honest here. I'm 2 years into my first church as a lead pastor, and I don't feel like we've seen a lot of big things happen like I've had hoped for when starting out. What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, kudos for acknowledging that in your own self. I don't want to just jump right into the meat of like where our heart might be struggling with some damage and stuff, but a lot of times, even in my own ministry, you'll get a little envious of somebody and you don't even realize that you are. It'll just come out in other ways. So I think I just want to start there and say that's a good exercise for pastors in general, and maybe even any church leaders. Sit down and say, hey, where's some places where I'm a little jealous and envious? So I think that's good. And second of all, leaning into it, I think a good place to start is, have you tried praying for them? Because I know there's a couple people in this town who, like, there's some wounds between me and whatever, and I've just put them on my constant prayer rotation. Every single time it comes up, I'm praying for them. And it's like not the kind of prayers that, like passive aggressive. But because, and what that also, that's for them, that's just where I'm saying that helps there again, start with the heart. You're already acknowledging it. So if you can go in even more and deal with your heart, I think that's a great place to start, man. So kudos just before we even begin on that.
I mean, I think practically based on what you said, you might want to just get off social media for a while. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Social media is causing you to feel envious. Just quit being on it. You really don't have to be on it. I know there's the whole thing of, well, how am I going to stay connected to the community and blah, 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 blah. And that's not worth having your heart kind of turn in on itself. And your soul is going to kind of eat you from the inside out if you're living a life of envy. The second thing, which obviously is in the end of the question here, is, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of admitting that you had some wrong expectations when you became a pastor. I know that we are in the world of, I'm going to assume, evangelicalism, and how we all have to do big things and feel this great sense of calling and all that. But I just don't think that's true for most of us. We're called to do ministry where we're called. And, I talked about this, I guess it's in last week's episode when it comes to leadership, but the health of your soul as a leader is more important than the quote unquote big things you might have thought you were called to do. The big thing that God might want to do in your life is healing your own soul of these kind of weird expectations and envy that you went into ministry with. You are not like a neutral vessel that doesn't matter. Like your soul and your health and your life, and I'm assuming you're married and maybe have kids, all of that stuff matters. And so if you're putting yourself in an environment where you are giving yourself over to walking down the path of envy, you need to get off that path, first of all, and then you need to find ways for Jesus to kind of step in and heal some things in your heart that maybe you had some wrong ideas, or maybe you need to dive even deeper and realize that you got into ministry for maybe not all the greatest reasons. I think any of us that are in ministry in this environment, the reality is we all have some insecurities and things that we deal with. And part of the reason why we're good at what we do is that we are one of the only people in our church who is willing to stand up in front of a group of people and have everyone look at us and preach and teach and lead and do those things. And there's a shadow side to that. And the shadow side is what you're feeling right now. The shadow side is that you want to be the man. And the reality is Jesus' call is to come and die, not to be famous. So I agree with Del for, kudos to you for kind of admitting this and pointing this out. But what's really going to help you is admitting this and pointing this out to people who can actually be with you in real community, whether that be your elders or maybe your spouse or other pastor friends. And so I would encourage you to get around community. Maybe you need to be in Florida in February and have conversations with other pastors, because guaranteed all of us feel this from time to time.
I feel this constantly. I sit next to Tim every single week.
Say towards Tim?
Wow. Did you write this question?
I didn't write this question, but
Anonymous Andrew.
But I pastor a church that we hit 100 people maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and we are at capacity when we do. And there's no room for much more growth. We're geographically landlocked. We can't expand our parking lot. Our elders don't want to go to more services. So this is kind of who we are. And God has used it to do such a beautiful thing in my heart, because coming in here, I had left an unhealthy church situation, and I remember the first couple weeks that we were here, the church I was at previously was in decline, and I thought I was going to come here and, it was 40 people when I got here, and man, we're going to turn this around, and hey, we'll race you to 200 church that's in decline because you're losing people and we're gaining people. And 7 years later, we're not going to hit that probably ever. It would take some leadership changes and some philosophy of ministry changes. And my best friend in ministry, who I talk to more than I have any other coworker, was in a really crappy situation where kind of was thrust into, hey, you're the pastor now, and preached sermons that I had written for the first 5-6 months.
Had to.
And saw this huge growth and went from unhealthy to healthy. So not only numeric growth, but went from sick, kind of cancerous, to really healthy spot. And by the grace of God, the part of me that needed the ego to die watched that, and I was like, okay, God, you can use me to do all kinds of things, but the Holy Spirit is going to move how the Holy Spirit is going to move. It's not clearly the sermon was the same. The delivery was different. The setting was not that different, but the Holy Spirit's going to move how the Holy Spirit's going to move. And it has been really a sweet 5 years of recognizing from the moment, from realize, hey, we aren't going to become this mega church with 26 parking spots. That just isn't going to work. But there were moments of, should I be frustrated? Should I be offended? Should I be looking to go elsewhere? And kind of hearing the leading of the Spirit to just say, don't you trust that God's Spirit is going to move and God's Spirit's going to do what God's going to do? Are you so wrapped up in what's happening at other churches that you can't rejoice in what's happening at your own? So I echo Jeff completely. Do you know what? Delete your Instagram, or, only use something to post things for church. You don't need to be scrolling and looking at what God is doing in other churches right now, because God is doing something in your church. Otherwise, the doors would be closed.
Mhm.
Do you know how many churches are dying each and every year? Your church isn't dying. You've got 2 years there, which means that you're still probably 3 years away from half of those people seeing you as their pastor. So lean in and rejoice in the fact that God has put you in a position where you get to serve his people. Be a good steward of what you have, and don't focus on the talents that the preacher down the street got when you thought you should have gotten 10 instead of 1.
Andrew, I know I was supposed to preach the opening session of the Practically Pastoring Conference, but I feel like that was like absolute gold. If I were attending a conference and you opened with, like a sermon length of that thought, I would be like struck to my core. Like it's so good because it perfectly summarizes what you and I have talked about over and over these last 4 or 5 years since we've seen kind of like what God has been up to at Lakeview. Is just this idea of our calling is not to see how fast we can grow an organization. Our calling is to faithfulness.
Well done, that good and faithful servant. Not well done, thou efficient servant. Not well done, effective servant. Faithful.
The idea here is faithfulness with a little or faithfulness with a lot. Either way, the key to this is faithfulness. And like you said, God's going to do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
So we trust in God's sovereignty, but whether things are going awesome or they suck, we're going to be faithful. We're going to remain faithful, and we're going to be steadfast and trusting that God's ultimately under control and he's got this.
And I'm guessing that there's a whole lot of good things happening at your church, because if a church is making a transition to a new first-time senior pastor, the churches that can afford the experienced pastors don't hire first-time pastors, and they hired you. And 2 years later, the lights are still on and the doors are still open. So something is happening. Good things are happening.
But I do appreciate the question, because I think this is so real and honest and raw. And I none of us, like watching, listening, talking right now, have not experienced this at some point in our ministries, where we have seen what God's doing elsewhere, and we've had that thought of, why not here? Like why is God not?
And I still get that, and I still struggle with that, but God's going to do what God's going to do.
But to Jeff's point, like having guys and ministry leaders around you when you're experiencing these seasons is huge. It's key. I can imagine, how many difficult seasons we had in Lakeview Student Ministries where I had to come to you, Andrew, because I would call you. I don't know how many Wednesday nights with like, man, half of our youth group didn't show up. I don't know what's going on. Why am I even doing this? And you were always there to, listen and to tell me how awesome student ministry was going for you at that time. It's just like, it's funny how things worked out like that.
Seasonal and cyclical.
Right.
I hate to state the obvious, but you guys love each other and you are friends. And, can I just offer that to this person as well? Like, if you're jealous of some pastors in your area, one of the things that I would encourage is, have you met with them and befriended them? Because
preach.
It's really hard to hate somebody that you love. And even in our community, when I was doing full-time student ministry only, I would meet with the student pastors once a week. We met every Wednesday, and it was no agenda. It was just have coffee and be friends. And if one of our students was to go to the other pastor's church, we'd be like, why are you here? Aren't you Caleb's kid? It helped cut that down, but also it instilled a level of trust in all of us. It was very helpful. And also, I think, another thing that's unstated is maybe you're envious because you're not friends. Another reason you may be envious is because maybe it's not a faithful church or a church that you see as faithful, to which that would be a place where you should probably pray. I went to school in upstate South Carolina, and there was a big church that will remain unnamed up there. And they were sucking away everyone's members, even my professors. And I just asked them, how do you deal with that? And they were very honest. They're like, that's very difficult because when their auntie dies, the big church doesn't preach funerals. So guess who they come back to? me, who they haven't been here in 4 years. So there's definitely some space where you might be jealous because something you don't see is effective. I would still, if you can, engage them in a conversation. If not, man, Jeff, you might just hit the nail on the head. Get off social, or they'd never know if you block them. I don't think, or you could do like a soft block where they don't see that you've blocked them.
Hit
just
that
to
mute button.
Yes,
so it doesn't show up in your feed. But
yes,
you can still check in on them when you want to.
And I think most pastors have y'all. I've had to do that. Have y'all had to do that? It's like I see pastors when they get into like massive self-promoting and they never let anyone know a good deed they did that didn't go undone. I just have to mute it. So, that's for my heart. That's not for them. So I think, Jeff, you from this onset, I think you were kind of like, you have control over that area of what you see on social. You have control.
I forgot what speaker it was, but the conference we were at, someone said from the stage, envy is the narrative you tell yourself that you perceive as true. And it's like, basically, it's like when you feel envy or jealousy, it's the narrative that you're telling yourself that may not actually be rooted in reality. But even if it's rooted in reality, you're telling yourself a narrative that that something is being withheld from you or something's being taken from you when that's not rooted in reality. I mean, Delmar, I think you nailed it on the head. Like, when I have been friends with the ministries of the pastors of the ministries that are bigger than mine or more successful or whatever metrics I want to use by, I tend not to be jealous of them because I know them and I'm rooting for them, right? And oftentimes they're rooting for me too. And they're like, we're sharing resources, we're sharing ideas. Most of the time, envy and jealousy comes from people you don't know. Like, you just know the name of their building, you know maybe some stats about what's going on in their church, but you don't actually know that person. And like what Delmar said, it's like that relationship changes everything. There might be a reality though that this pastor is in a situation where he's tried to build relationships with those pastors and they've like, stiff-armed him. I know when I was a youth pastor in Tampa, for the years I was in youth ministry here, I called every youth pastor in the area to try to get lunch and whatever, and no one would answer my phone call because I was the really tiny church with 24 kids in their youth group, and for whatever reason I didn't get, I mean it was all dumb. My big joke was being famous in youth ministry or being successful, not successful, but I think being a famous youth pastor is like having the biggest potato at the state fair. Like, congratulations, but who really cares? Like, this is the dumbest competition we're competing in, right? And I think that, like, man, with Andrew's story and like what we're trying to convey here as a podcast is like, when I first read this post, my first comment, I decided not to write the comment and wait till we got in here, but my first comment was, you need friends in ministry. Like, you need, one, to be able to vent this with people that you can talk to face, and two, you need to build relationships with maybe the other people in these churches. I mean, like, being on the other side of in those churches that are multi-site, that are growing and are large, I could tell you all the shadow side not dirty secrets, but like, it's not as glamorous as people think it is. And I can tell you all the ways I was hungry to learn from people who were not in my situation because it's not always that glamorous. So anyways, I hope Andrew's testimony by itself was worth listening to, but I think everyone here has kind of said the same thing as like, whenever social media is making me feel emotions I do not want to feel, my first thought is to remove the social media and to either limit it, block it, maybe get the app off my phone and just only access it through the browser. Do whatever you got to do in that case. And then secondly is like to deal with the actual envy. And maybe that first step in dealing with the envy is building relationships with those pastors. So with that being said, I think this episode, the Christmas week episode, might be one of the best episodes of the year. This was such great content. What a great way to end 2024. I think it's the last episode of the year. When we get to 2025, we got some exciting stuff going on. We might have a little bit of reorganization as a network in terms of wanting to produce content for you guys to do cool stuff. Maybe you'll see on YouTube and on Instagram some individual stuff that is like bonus content to kind of help resource you. But we are excited about what's happening here at Practically Pastoring. And listen, I can't stress this enough. If there's one thing you can do for us, one thing that you can consider doing for us, is joining us at the Practically Pastoring Conference here in Tarpon Springs, Florida. With that being said, I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm Delmar Pete.
I'm Andrew Larson.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
This is Practically Pastoring. See you next year.
See ya.